Hi, I'm Dustin from Wilwood Engineering, and today we're going to take a look at the 66 Mustang Wilwoods building. This car started out as an R&D project. It was an all-original Shelby GT350 4-speed big block car, I think. No. It was a 6-cylinder car, automatic, completely thrashed when we bought it. Okay, well I feel better about cutting it up then. In any case, once the R&D projects were completed with it, we decided to turn it into Will's first competition car. So let's take a look at where we're at.
When we started looking for suspension setups for this car, we found that Total Cost Involved offered a complete front and rear suspension system for the early Mustang. Their front suspension uses an upper and lower control arm dampened by a coilover shock, eliminating the factory shock towers and leaving us enough room for the Coyote motor.
The rear suspension is a torque arm type suspension with a long torque arm that braces to the chassis up near the transmission and really controls the roll of the rear axle. And again, coilover shocks in the rear as well. When it came time to pick a rear axle, we went to Strange Engineering. They're a longtime Wilwood partner, and we needed a full floating rear axle with the hubs positively retained at the end of the axle, so you didn't encounter any piston knockback. This is the way professional race cars have been built for a long time, and it's time for this technology to make it to the street. So we selected their full floater with the aluminum center section, trying to keep the rear end light. Now, part of the TCI suspension package also brings in a complete subframe connection package. This ties the front and rear subframes of the factory suspension together, as well as gives mounting places for all of TCI's rear suspension. So now we're going to take a look at the roll cage. All the parts for the pieces for the cage were supplied by Chassis Works, Chris Olson's Chassis Works to be specific. It consists of the main hoop, we've got the rear braces, the front down bars, of course tied together at the top. And we even went ahead and put bars that go out and carry the front subframe, so we're tied together all the way from the front to the rear of the car. One of the great things about the Chris Olson Chassis Works kits is they come with all the little gussets you need to weld the cage up tight. Another thing that comes from Chris Olson's Chassis Works are the rear inner fender tubs. They're 2 inches wider than the factory size. That allows us to get a lot more tire under this car. Now, of course, the TCI front suspension converts you to a rack and pinion type steering arrangement, and to control that rack and pinion, we got a column from I Did It. This is a direct bolt-in column for this car, and because we're fancy and have good machining capabilities, we made our own little column drop bracket to set the column right where we want it. Now, this is certainly going to be a capable track car, but it's also going to get a lot of time on the street. We intend to drive it on the Hot Rod Power Tour, and anything that's going to drive through the Midwest during the middle of the summer should have air conditioning. So we called up Vintage Air and got their air conditioning kit for the 66 Mustang, and this is really going to keep things cool in here and make this car a lot more drivable in the summer heat. When we bought this car, I think I mentioned that it was completely thrashed, and one of the things that was completely thrashed was basically the floorboards from the toe board all the way back to the back seat. So we replaced the entire floorboard and toe board, and while we were at it, we realized the transmission was going to take up a lot more room than we had, so it was time to build a custom transmission tunnel to house the transmission and the drive shaft. The T56 is a huge transmission compared to the factory original automatic, so we ended up with quite a tunnel to cover it up, but it lands the shifter in a really convenient position. It's time to start setting the seats in it and get an idea of what the interior was going to look like. And when we set the seat in, we realized that it was sitting about 2 inches too high on the stock seat raisers. So, because we're good at fabrication, we pulled them out, cut them down about 2 inches, lowered the whole thing down, and then put our seats on it. And if you don't look too close, it actually looks pretty close to factory. We were looking for a comfortable seat with good bolsters, but not a full-on race seat, bucket type seat. And we came across these from Corbeau. They've got a nice reclining feature to them. They're not a fixed back seat. And the side bolsters are really strong without being too restrictive for a street car. Would be. We went with the 5-point harnesses from Impact Safety. This is a cam lock design so that one turn of the cam unlocks all of the belts for easy in and easy out. And this ought to hold us tightly in place in all the track events we intend to participate in. On most old cars, the sheet metal's pretty beat up, so we started looking around for replacements, and we came across these fenders from Mike Meyer Racing. He's been in the composites business for a long time, not to mention he's a top driving talent in autocross racing in Southern California, and his whole business is Meyer Racing. Now, for this particular build, we decided to go with the front fenders, hood, front apron, and the rear trunk lid, along with a set of matching fender flares, all from Meyer Racing. Now, rather than trying to hammer out the original panels from this car, which are mostly rusted out and in pretty bad shape, we decided to go with new doors and new quarter panels from National Parts Depot. The wheels we selected for this project are from Bose Alloys, and this is their Pro Light wheel, 18 by 9.5 in the front and an 18 by 11 in the rear. As you can see, the tires are sticking out of the fenders quite a bit in the rear, and we're going to have a full fender flare put on at the body shop, which is where this car is headed next. Now, the tires are from Falcon, and these are the Azenas 615 RT tire. They've got a 200 tread wear rating. They're really sticky street tires, and we're using a 275 on the front and a 315 on the rear. One of the most challenging parts of putting a new motor in an old car can be finding exhaust plumbing. The headers for this were built by Doug's Headers, and they use this car as a prototype for Coyote swaps into early Mustangs. When it came to the fuel tank, we decided that Rick's Stainless Tanks was the best place to go for us. We had them build us a custom tank out of aluminum. This is their VaporWorks line, and it comes with the internal pump. It's fully baffled, and it's set up for either a returnless or return style fuel system. For the rest of the fuel system, we contacted Aeromotive. They supplied us with the billet fuel rails, the regulator, the filter, and all the fittings and hoses we were going to need to plumb this car. When it comes to oiling system products, we went to Canton, and they supplied us with a whole bunch of oil control, including this AccuSump accumulator. This will probably fit inside the passenger side fender and plumb into the oil system, supplying us with fresh oil at all times. While the Canton AccuSump will keep plenty of oil supplied to the motor, the Setrab cooler will keep the oil cool, and that's plumbed with Russell fittings from Edelbrock. Another tough aspect of putting a new motor in an old car is the radiator. In this case, we went to CNR Radiators. They make a direct bolt-in radiator with spall fans and shroud already attached for the early Mustangs, with coolant inlet and outlet designed for the late model Coyote motor. When you're building a car like this, the engine comes in and out multiple times, and it's a real pain to try to get that whole T56 and Coyote motor shoehorned in and out. So we decided to make this aluminum core support attachment that allows us to unbolt it, take the motor out, put the motor back in, bolt it back in place. I mentioned that at the front of the cage we had down bars that came out to the engine compartment and picked up the front suspension. These are those down bars. Notice they're welded in two different places, and they run all the way back to the front of the cage. The Vintage Air power steering pump doesn't have a reservoir, so you need to add an external one. We picked up this reservoir from Canton and plumbed it up with Russell fittings and hoses from Edelbrock. The early Mustang engine bay doesn't have a lot of room to start with, and even with the shock towers removed, the Coyote motor takes up about all the available real estate. In order to mount the master cylinders for the front brakes, rear brakes, and the clutch, we had to build this remote mounting plate to move the master cylinders back in away from the back of the engine. And of course, we're using our brand new aluminum reservoirs and billet mounting bracket to feed those masters. Now we're building this car with two goals in mind. Number one, we want to be fast at the track, and number two, we want this to have daily driver reliability, which is why we went with the Coyote motor from Ford. It's 400 easy, reliable horsepower, daily driver reliable horsepower. We back that up with the factory T56 transmission. We get good mileage on the highway, but when it's time to go, the car will go. Of course, we sold this to the boss as a marketing car with lots of stickers on it that people are going to see, and we sold this to the R&D department as a plan to do lots of development and lots of testing, all of which is going to happen. We also ordered 6 sets of tires before the car is even at the paint shop, if that gives you any idea of the kind of thrashing we intend to put on this car. We're going to take it to autocrosses, pro touring events, track days, and really put some miles on this thing. And that's why we've named this car the Wilwood Workhorse.